U.S. President Donald Trump is adding his voice to the list of American politicians now blaming Canada for that smoke billowing across the border as a result of all these wildfires. In a post today on Truth Social, Trump has threatened Canada with tariffs over the smoke, adding he plans to call Prime Minister Mark Carney to figure out what the country is going to do about it. For more on those cross-border threats, we're joined by journalist Nick Harper. So, Nick, take us through in more detail what exactly President Trump is threatening here with the smoke.
Well, Tanya, we've certainly seen plenty of anti-Canada sentiment since Donald Trump returned to the White House last year. This is the latest salvo, and it's all about frustration on the US side about that wildfire smoke that is heading into the United States. And you can see behind me, this is the view of Washington, D.C. tonight. Very hazy conditions. This is what Donald Trump would be looking at if he looked out of the White House window. That frustration growing now in a social media post. He has said that he accuses Canada of willful negligence, says that he's holding Canada responsible, and also says that the United States is now being unnecessarily invaded by filthy, polluted and unhealthy air, the quality of which is dangerous and totally unacceptable. The president is not happy, and he says that the cost of these wildfires to Americans runs into the billions. And as a result, he says, out of necessity, that cost must be added to Canada's tariffs. So a new threat, additional tariffs on Canada this evening from the US president. It's not clear exactly how that would work or even how much the tariffs would be. But the president obviously felt strongly enough about this to post on social media and make it clear he wants to hold Canada responsible for these wildfires and the smoke drifting into the United States.
And as you see, we can see right behind you a very visible problem that's now turned political. And it's not just Trump. We understand several Republican lawmakers have also come out criticizing Canada in an open letter. What are they saying?
Yeah, and we've seen that frustration, Tanya, growing throughout the week. They say that over the last few years, there has been this repeated pattern of wildfire smoke heading into the United States. So 4 congressmen and women from the state of Michigan, a state bordering Canada, have written this open letter to the Prime Minister. They've demanded accountability, but also said that this is a crisis that Canada has the tools to prevent and has chosen not to, threatening to send US agencies across the border to deal with the situation. There's also a Republican senator in Ohio who has put legislation before Congress. It's called the Canada Fire Act. If this were to be passed by the US Congress, it would see sanctions being placed on Canada in the form of visa sanctions, the revocation of those for any officials that Americans feel are responsible for what's taking place with this wildfire smoke heading into the United States. Tanya?
All right, journalist Nick Harper, thanks so much. Here to talk more about the science and perhaps the nuance of that traveling wildfire smoke, we're joined by Lori Daniels. She's professor of Forest and Conservation Sciences at the University of British Columbia. So thank you so much for coming in to chat with us, Lori.
Glad to be here. Under unfortunate circumstances.
Yeah, I know, it is unfortunate. Let's get right to what Donald Trump has just said a few hours ago, basically joining the chorus, blaming Canada for the smoke in the States. What do you make of it?
Yeah, it's an unfortunate that the politicians are getting on board and beginning to kind of project this idea that the smoke is our fault and that there was something we could do to stop it. This focus on the blame game, and then also this focus on forest management, that's what we should do, really is a way that they can deflect from other factors that are driving these forest fires worldwide, in particular climate change and the influence of hot, dry, windy weather and the extremes that we've been experiencing.
Let's talk more about forest management. I mean, they're drawing a lot of those direct parallels, saying wildfire control is directly tied to forest management. The last time you and I spoke was a few months ago. We were actually traipsing through the forest near UBC, talking about the wildfire season to come, forest mitigation, what we would expect to see. Here we are. What do you make of that? I mean, I know you support, mitigation work, but how directly can they blame it or lack of?
Absolutely. So one, we do need to be investing in mitigation and assessing forests around all communities in fire vulnerable environments and thinking about ways that we can reduce the fuels, reduce the tree densities, and actually create defensible space around communities for exactly this reason, so that we can protect communities during wildfire season when fires do burn towards the individual communities. But if we think about the expanse of Canadian forests, I mean, we have hundreds of millions of hectares of forest. If you took all the national forests in the United States together, combined them up, and totaled up how many hectares they have, in Canada, we have 7 times as much forest in the boreal forest alone. So we're talking about a vast area that we would have to try to manage and control fires on in all of that area. And it's physically not possible. Our forests are vast. Trying to get into every fire that starts is virtually impossible because there aren't road networks and it's very difficult to get there except by air. And then the other thing is we don't want to stop all fires. Fire is an essential part of these ecosystems. And the fires that are in the more remote areas are critically important for forest revitalization, for recycling the trees, and for creating diversity of forests across the landscape, including creating habitat for biodiversity.
And in this case, it's not so much the fires themselves, it's the effect of the smoke that's become problematic. Of course, smoke knows no boundaries. It could be burning a few kilometers from the border, but the smoke doesn't know borders. So, of course, it's kind of at the mercy of whichever direction the wind is blowing. Talk a little bit about the science behind what we're seeing right now. I know there was a similar situation, I believe it was last year even, where the smoke was blowing south. Is this unusual? Is it an anomaly of how far it's going into the States? Like, talk a bit about what we're seeing this year.
Yeah, so I think part of what we're seeing right now is there was numerous fires that started from a lightning outbreak close to the U.S. border in northwest Ontario that we know has driven those really heartbreaking pictures of people escaping from those fires in an emergency situation. Those forests burning are putting up a lot of smoke right close to the border, and so they're near the source. The winds blow, our prevailing winds blow generally west to east across Canada at this latitude. So if we kind of take a look at a bigger picture, you know, in Alaska, when there's fires, the smoke blows into Western Canada. When there's Western Canadian fires, they burn towards Eastern Canada, sometimes south of the border. So in this occasion, with the way the weather patterns are and the way those fires broke out and create a lot of smoke intensely in a short period in northwest Ontario, and then that smoke carried on the wind, ended up both in the big cities in Canada and some big cities in the United States, and have consequence there. I think it's important for the Americans to remember, too, that smoke blows both ways. The worst air quality that we've ever measured here in British Columbia was because of smoke from fires in California a few years ago.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's interesting, the timing, too. We can't ignore the fact U.S. midterm elections coming up. A lot of these Republican lawmakers who've been joining Donald Trump's call for this, what would you say to them if you were sitting face-to-face with them right now and you had essentially an elevator pitch to tell them in response to what they're saying? What would you say to them?
Yeah, I think it's an uninformed conversation that they're trying to lead, that they're deflecting from the complexities of fire, and when they do that, they don't actually contribute to a real solution. We need to be addressing the fact that there's global warming driving driving portion of these fires. There's definitely forest management that we could do, but we need to invest large amounts of money into shifting our forest management and doing that fuels mitigation. And frankly, when our governments have tried to invest in that in the past, and I think here in British Columbia, where we've been trying for 20 years to come up with ways to be able to afford to do this and scale up to address the problem, well, it's actually tariffs and softwood lumber agreement and violation of that agreement that American companies and the American government has complained to us in the past. So you can't have your cake and eat it too. We need to invest in our forests in Canada. We need to manage them for resiliency. We need to manage around our communities for safety through fuels mitigation. That costs a lot of money. Our governments need to invest in that, and we can't be held back because of more tariffs by the United States.
Lori Daniels, thank you so much for joining us here live in person today. Really, really appreciate your insight on all of this.
Well, thank you. Stay safe.
Yeah, you bet, you too. That's Lori Daniels, forestry and wildfire expert at the University of British Columbia.